We look at a crazy Omega from 1998, Dawn of the Dead, 4 watch brands that have come back. We talk about eBay authentication in a little bit more depth, and Chris talks about his brand new Bell & Ross. Welcome back to Casual Watch Talk. You're joined by Sam and Chris. Chris, how have you been?
Pretty good, Sam. How have you been?
I've not been too bad, actually. I've been having a little bit of a clear out of the old watch box in preparation for the new Seiko coming, which I thought I was going to get it soon.
Yeah.
TJ, big shout out to TJ. I'll flash up some pictures of his. He actually got his.
Yeah.
He ordered it direct from Seiko. So I'm seething with jealousy, but hopefully I'll get mine this week.
Yes. And the he did answer the question that was on everyone's mind about the 24-hour. So it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't seem like it. Doesn't seem like it's movable, but you know, it's still great looking watch.
Yeah, and he wasn't sure whether the bezel was ceramic or not. So I said, tap it against your front teeth. And he still wasn't sure because I think, and then I thought, well, maybe even if it was thick paint on there, it might have the same sort of that warmth that ceramic has.
Yeah. It still should be a sharp, almost like a glass sort of response.
Yeah, and I would like it. I would be pleasantly surprised if it was, but I'm sure Seiko would have made a real song and dance about it if it had been. But as soon as I get mine, I'm going to do the review. But well, should we do watches that we do actually have?
Right, yeah.
Want to do a wristwatch check?
Yeah, well, I am wearing the new Bell & Ross 10th anniversary, so we'll talk about that. Do you want to do your check?
Yeah, I will do very quickly. I've been wearing my Christopher Ward again, but today I put on because I was having a sort out of the watch box. I've put a few on eBay and stuff, but I've got the Ultimate Turtle.
Oh, nice!
I've been wearing it again.
Nice.
I keep forgetting how good the case is on the Turtle. It's so comfortable.
Yeah.
It's a great design.
Yeah,
it's a great design.
Great watch. And that bracelet, super comfy.
Yeah, the razor wire from Uncle Seiko, one of my absolute favorites.
Nice.
So, I recommend it.
Yeah. So Bell & Ross, first impressions. I mean, geez, we got a lot to talk about today with eBay and the authentication process. So I'm going to talk a little bit on my side about that, and then we'll hit it up a little later. A little more detailed. So this is the watch from 2006. This one's from 2006. It was originally released in 2004. And it came in a fancy gloss presentation box, one of those like oversized novelty boxes that we kind of, joke at when we get reviews for. And it looks like that poor box has gone through about 6 or 7 moves across the country because it's got a couple of dings and dents in it and, a little beat up. But the good news is the watch itself, I think, and this was in the description as well, I think this has probably been worn only a handful of times.
Oh, wow.
So none of the typical light scratching that you see underneath the lugs from changing straps. There is just a slight little nick out of the top of the bezel for the black coating. But other than that, this watch I would describe in near mint condition, or at least just, with those little imperfections. Shipping was super quick, even though I hate FedEx. I don't know what you feel about FedEx, Sam?
Yeah, I don't. I'm indifferent about them. I haven't had a bad experience yet, except for... No, that was UPS.
Okay.
I'm indifferent about FedEx.
Okay. Yeah, so, I mean, I've had some craziness with them, and I've heard horror stories, but nonetheless, shipping was super fast, came right to the door, signature. But, the real news is, I think the watch is gorgeous. So white dial, sort of a metallic finish that goes from like a light champagne to white. I had it out in the sun. I'm sure you're popping that B-roll up right now. It's a limited edition Panda dial. And so limited edition Panda is best Panda. So one of 500 for them. it has the ETA 28994-2. That's the bicompax movement, and I did open it up and inspect that it is all looking correct. So you'll just even though it went through the authentication process. So this watch basically celebrates Bell & Ross's first chronograph from 1994. It's funny, the French translation in the pamphlet was like their recreation chronograph. And so you're like, well, it isn't a recreation, it's a real thing. But it's based on sort of their vintage style because, they started in 1994. And so, their style. So interesting there. Sam, I know you like a good date on a watch. The date window was a little divisive over on my Instagram.
Oh, yes, it's sort of nestled in between the 4 and the 5. And that's not uncommon for Bell & Ross, is it? That's where they normally place it?
Yeah. So in a round date window with the date being horizontal to the face of the watch. So it's not, off at a 45-degree angle. Whether you love or hate date on a watch, at least it's typical with their style. And even my new GMT has the same placement, same style, round window down in the 430.
Well, I like it because they've been. It's got it's got numbers on it as well, hasn't it? So and they've been very respectful of that. So they haven't cut off there's no 3 and 9, but they haven't amputated a 3 and 9. They've just left them off, and then you haven't sacrificed any of the 4 and the 5 to accommodate the date. They've kind of nestled it in there. It gives it a really distinctive look overall, doesn't it? I like the look of it. I like that oversized hand. I said this to you first, on the running seconds. Is that the oversized hand?
Yeah, on the run. Yeah, super unique for the 30-minute subdial. Yeah. Everything is polished up. The case and sort of the design, super reminds me of Zinn, for obvious reasons. I did read that the box sapphire on this, this is tough I didn't have time to run this down, but they said in the pamphlet that it took them some time to come up with it. So I'm thinking 2004 sapphire. That was maybe early days for that tech, or at least the box sapphire rounded. Some Bell & Ross quick history. So 1992 is actually their starting date. I think I said 94 earlier, but 92. And I'll just go. I'm sure if you've heard this, but this is my typical. They started working with Zinn. They did a deal with Zinn. They started their brand. They started marketing their brand, and broke out on their own in 2002. And then this first Pilot's Chrono, this model was introduced in 2004 to celebrate the 10 years of that watch that they started building in 1994. So their square watches, their typical square watches, didn't come out till 2005. And in my collection, and it's interesting, you mentioned cleaning out the collection. I think at this point I'm settled into, I have watches that I wear all the time, and then I have a collection of watches. And some of those can exist in the same space, and some of those maybe not, less so, more so. This one's definitely a collection piece for me. It fills right in between my Zinn 103, so the Bell & Ross chronograph by Zinn, and then at the early, that's from the early, the late 90s, early 2000s, all the way up to my 2018 BRV2 93 GMT, which is what I consider modern. I paid a really good price for this. It almost didn't make the authentication minimum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was close. So the authentication minimum is is $2,000. So really, really struck a good deal there. Really, I was super, super happy about it. Super fortunate to get it.
There's not a lot of other we talk about different things from other channels, but there's not a lot of other watch YouTubers that really talk about Bell and Ross, not that I'm aware of or regularly. And it is one of those brands, you know, we've talked about Christopher Ward as well, but Bell and Ross is one of those brands that's definitely, it's not an enthusiast brand, but I feel like more people should know about it.
Yeah. I think more average Joes know about it than I'm always surprised when sort of some of my common, like some of my friends will mention it. So yeah, it has recognition, but yeah, not as direct. I haven't seen anyone, so maybe I'm holding down the Bell and Ross YouTuber for sure, which is fine with me.
Yeah, and this is not sponsored by Bell and Ross, but we are welcome.
Welcome,
please.
Yes,
welcome.
Some more 10th anniversary editions, no problem. And then sort of the last comments on that I had written down of it was and I get the eBay authentication. This will play into it. So totally magnetized when I got it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I ran the compass over it and it was all over the place.
Wow. So but you don't know where that happened, whether that happened on the watchmaker's bench or, I mean, if they authenticate it, well, we won't rush into it because we're going to talk about that in a bit. But let's move on. We usually do a hit or miss. We couldn't find a funny hit or miss this week, but last week I made a comment asking whether the show itself was a hit or miss, and thank you everyone for all of the really nice comments. We do appreciate it, and thanks for everyone who commented saying it was a hit.
Appreciate it.
There was one gentleman who said that listening to two dudes talk about watches wasn't really doing it for him, and it really made me like inwardly reflect and consider some like really, you know, in-depth subjects and really sort of strong feelings I had about it. But my overwhelming feeling was a sense of that we missed out. Like, why didn't we call the show Two Blokes That Talk About Watches?
I know, right?
Two dudes that talk about watches. We missed a trick there. We missed a trick.
Opportunity.
So thank you to that gentleman who enjoyed watching two dudes talk about watches, and thank you for your comment. Thank you for everyone's comments. But thank you to everyone that said that they enjoyed the show. We really appreciate it. And if you've got any topic ideas, let us know over on the Facebook. And for the people that don't use Facebook, let us know in the comments, or you can email us at thecasualwatchreviewer@gmail.com. That's thecasualwatchreviewer@gmail.com, which is linked to the YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, let's dive into the news, and I suppose this could technically, this could technically be a hit or miss, I guess. But Hodinkee did an article on skeletonized watches, and this blew me away. I had no idea that from 1998 there was a limited edition skeletonized Omega Seamaster. I thought it might be one of those Artisan de Genève watches, but if you click through, it was actually one that Omega sold. I mean,
wow.
What do you think of this, Chris?
Wow. Yeah, you're right. It does look like someone carefully removed the hands and the dial and got the got the bandsaw out and kind of cut it out. That's I mean, it looks great. It's interesting, but I would not have guessed that was a OEM original.
This is one of the amazing things, isn't it, about doing watches, isn't it? Let's while we're on it, because people will be looking this up like nobody's business, and we might as well do a bit of live evaluation. Let's even see if there's one on Chrono 24, because I'm amazed. There isn't even one on Chrono 24. I'm amazed that out of all the years we've been doing this, this podcast, and the years I've been doing the channel, I never ever knew that this Omega existed, and I thought I had a good idea of a lot of what Omega was pumping out, especially something so distinctive like that. But leave it to Hodinkee too.
Yeah, and I was at the Omega boutique one time. We were at a meet, and they had some unique pieces that they pulled out that were very similar to this modern, but skeletonized, tourbillon, different things that you just do not see. So it's sort of in keeping. I just the fact that they've sort of been doing it the whole time. I think a lot of watch manufacturers will have like a handful of these pieces. I know Bell and Ross does. I know a bunch of companies, Omega, etc., will have these sort of super specialized collector pieces, and I think they were I think this sort of predates the special edition. This is the watchmaker special edition.
Yeah, this is like 50th anniversary they released it for, but it's amazing. And to do it on a Seamaster as well, which you think they would do it on one of the other, like the Constellations or something like that, but to do it on a Seamaster and keep that sort of 90s James Bond case, although it's in gold here, really interesting find. I just had to mention it. Next story as well, back to Hodinkee. They did a good job this week. We'll give them some brownie points this week. They did an article on watch brands that have kind of come back from the dead. It was their Halloween, one of their Halloween themes. And they've gone through a few that brands that have basically come back to life. But the one that really stuck out for me was this. It wasn't so much, so they were saying that Encar was the brand. Mm-hmm. I've said that wrong. I know. I apologize. I'm sure there's a different way of saying it. But they actually were talking about how somebody took the design, because apparently this brand has been bought and they're pumping out these kind of faux Rolex watches. But they talked about this German company that has made one that looked like a vintage one of these watches, and they've called it Sherpa, which I guess is a okay name for a watch, but I guess if they're going to do an explorer's watch, but this is a dive watch. But there's just something about it. And if you go on their website, you can pre-order it. I couldn't find a price. So it's got the Sellita SW200 on, so I'm guessing it's going to be 1,000 or 1,500. But I don't know what you think, Chris. There's something about this that just really is kind of doing it for me.
Yeah, it looks good.
It's kind of vintage design.
Yeah, I think we are awash. Have we reached peak compressor? We were talking about this last week.
We were talking about this last week. It's got the date, so you know I'm a sucker for the date. I love the hands. Yeah. If it's half as good as it looks, and then what do you think of the way the crowns are shrouded, and they're kind of stuck out, I guess, so you can use. Yeah,
unique. It's certainly unique. A little bit. It's not too. It's not too bad with the crown guard, and the top crown guard extends to the bottom, so it kind of extends out of the side of the watch, maybe 4 or 5 mil. So this company is a resurrection, if you will. Is that right?
Yes. So they're inspired by one of these vintage. I guess it's Einkar, is it, with brands? But this Einkar brand has been sold, and they're doing these like faux. It even mentions it in the Hodinkee article that they're doing these kind of weird Rolex-type dress watches. But it's actually based on a vintage one of those watches, but they've created their own brand called Sherpa around it.
Okay. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, it's cool.
I'm a fan. I've asked them for some... there's no pre-order price, but I've asked them I've emailed them to see if they, A, want to come on the show, and also, B, if they've got some pre-order price so we can share that with the viewers on here. That was the end for the news, but last week we touched on eBay authentication, and there was a few questions that we got sent in, and Chris, you've really been researching it, because the bit we didn't know was, and we said this last week, is where do the watches go? Mm-hmm. Like, where do they get sent and what happens to them? And you really took it upon yourself to do a lot of research, and you've come up with some really interesting stuff. So I'm actually looking forward to this, because I went through that eBay authentication process as a seller, and you've just gone through it as a buyer, haven't you?
Exactly.
So, yeah, would you like to
let's get into it.
Go into some of your research from this week?
So, I mean, this is the eBay authentication trick or treat episode. So I was curious to know. So we had a question. The kind of the first question we had was, where are these going? Like, who is opening them? What is happening? And while I think that there are more than one, eBay has been upfront in talking about one company called Stoll & Company. So they say they've partnered up with Stoll & Company a vetted third-party watch authenticator, and to basically send these particular pieces to them. This means that they are probably receiving hundreds of these a day. This is a big organization, big operation. I've heard some mention that they've gone to other places, but for the most part, from what I can tell right now, it seems to be mostly going to Stolen Company, and they're located in Ohio. Their website is completely not Stolen Company. It's americaswatchmaker.com. They're known as America's Watchmaker. So if you go on their site, I was interested. They do factory service for other brands, and they have watchmaker services. So this tells me this is an organization that has watchmakers employed by them. They're taking they're opening stuff. They're using the tools and techniques of a watchmaker. But I found it interesting. Their list of brands that they service, kind of a list of AA brands, and not what I would consider AAAs like Omega, Rolex, Cartier, IWC are not on that list. But they've got their
Booker are on there, aren't they? And they've got Vulcane, probably the top end ones. They've got Ball watches that they do, but you're right, they've got a Bomber Mercier as well, would be considered luxury, but they've also got some ones that we've certainly heard of, but I don't think a lot of people would have. They've got Delmer, they've got Frederic Constant on there, but not Citizen.
Yeah, they specifically
Helm watches.
Yeah. They specifically said that they don't handle any quartz. So that also tells me that they're set up as real watchmakers to, so it's not just like a thin inspection service that's like, oh, just send us anything, we'll inspect it. It is we're dealing, we know we're getting luxury watches, and so we're going to deal with them as such. So I thought about this in an interesting way. So let's diverge for a second and talk about Omega, vintage Omega, because I think there's a lesson here. So I would say maybe 3 or 5 years ago, everybody I knew that was getting involved in the watch collection hobby, at least on Instagram, according to Instagram, this is my research, was super interested in like those 1950s to 60s early Seamasters, the Constellation with the cool dial, and some of the cases are gold filled, some of the cases are plated, these sorts of things. And I think about that market and how many people I saw get into a vintage 1950 something Omega. They don't make parts for them anymore. Omega parts are hard to come by. You have to have either authorized dealers, or you have to have somebody who has a collection of old parts. So then you're doing new old stock stuff. And at the time there were a lot of people talking about this. I think that part of collecting those watches is super dangerous. Like as a collector, where you want your money to be worth something, where you're spending maybe $2,000, maybe $3,000, $4,000 in something vintage that is, a vintage dress watch that looks amazing and is also going to run. But that also brings in like questions of like, is it waterproof? Is it, can you even look at washing your hands while you have one of these on? If you don't have a watchmaker that that you can take it to like make sure it's, pressure tested, these sorts of things, you're kind of really in the Wild West. And I think about what the auction sites looked like 3 to 5 years ago, where you've got anything goes 1950 to 1959 Omega 3-hand, Constellation Seamaster. And eBay actually has a link. Sam can pop it up here. 1950 to 1959 Omega wristwatches. And what I noticed right away, if you sort from the highest price, or if you actually do a sort, sorry, up at the top. Yeah, there you go. High to low.
Yeah, you've done it. Yeah,
oh, you've done it. Okay. Oh, I already did it. Okay, good. Okay, so if you sort from highest price and you kind of scroll down a little bit, you'll notice that some of these watches, like that first row, that $5,000-$6,000 area, they do not have the authenticity guarantee flag on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that authenticity guarantee is saying that the watch is unmodified, so that it hasn't, it's original. It has all of its stuff. It has all of its original parts. And what I found really interesting with this link is to see the watches that are in a high price range, but aren't able to be authenticated by eBay. And remember, just because it has the authentication guarantee here, it doesn't mean it is actually authentic. Like, I've seen a bunch of comments that were like, oh, I saw a fake Omega and the dial was total garbage, but it had the authenticity guarantee. Well, the authenticity guarantee doesn't mean that it is yet. It has to,
when it's listed.
Right, when it's listed. It has to go and actually be authenticated. So it was surprising to me, the number of these watches that are not eligible. So this kind of tells me, like, geez, back in the day, that means that like 20-30% of the stuff that people were getting a hold of was questionable, was new old stock stuff, was like dial swaps, was Frankenstein, in various different ways. So
yeah, and it seems like also this is another thing you've got to be careful of. There's certainly some that are shipped from the US without the authenticity guarantee, but it looks like almost anyone that comes from Australia or the UK and you're buying it into America, maybe they don't run those programs there, but it looks like a lot that are in Great British pounds here, they're not offering the authenticity guarantee. But there's definitely a few. I mean, this is a US one without it. Here's another US one without it.
And
I noticed a couple.
And that is correct. I believe they are only offering it in the US. They're planning to offer it in more places, but I think you're right there. But
they could. Yeah. They're still. It's weird, isn't it, that even if they're being shipped to the US, they couldn't.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just a regional thing.
So it'll be interesting to see. But again, I'm considering, like, that was sort of my what would the watch space look like with this with this in place, to kind of clean up some of those those issues regarding the older vintage watches. I mean, do we have a poison apple situation? I mean, is it possible that someone has acquired a load of questionable watches, and spent time to try to trick eBay? So they would have to put, fake or new old stock parts in. They'd have to, pay a watchmaker, or at least someone who knew what they were doing, to, put these parts in. So, hundreds of dollars worth of labor. They're doing some sort of Photoshop to like clean up the listing, pictures. And then they somehow already have a new account that has, hundreds of transactions, of legitimate watch transactions that, that they're going to jeopardize. The ones that they spent hours on each listing, that they're somehow, going to send it into authentication and try to get it by the watchmakers that are looking at those watches, only to potentially scam someone like $200 to $500, of value or more. I mean,
Well, yeah, eBay's holding the cards, isn't it? Because they know the bank that they paid out to, so they could easily pull the money back in if they had to. And you're totally right. It helps not get scammed. That's one of the pros, but also we don't know. I wonder whether eBay would ever release it. Perhaps they would. I don't see why they wouldn't let us know how many get rejected by the authenticity guarantee. That would be interesting, but maybe that would expose them to people thinking, aha, I knew that there was a lot of
Right.
fakes.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it'll just be quietly. And I'm sure, as you know, my dealings with eBay tell me, I'm sure that store, so if you send something in that's questionable and it's not authenticated, that store is going to be super under scrutiny by eBay. And then you have, say it squeaks through. So then you have reviews, and people's feedback and stuff. So I just don't see someone trying to go out of their way to trick it, and jeopardize all of that in order to, I got that one Omega went for, 2,800 when it was only really worth 1,200 because it had a fake dial in it. You're like, cool, all that work for that.
Yeah, and the other advantage to using it as well with the authenticity guarantee is, and I've never told this story before, but my sister many, many years ago bought a Chloe handbag on eBay,
Mm-hmm.
and when it arrived, at the time she was collecting handbags, and she knew quite a lot about them, and she found out that it was fake, and eBay at the time wouldn't really help you out with it. This is just anecdotal one case, but she actually had what they requested that she did is go into the Chloe store and get them to write on letterheaded paper that this wasn't real. So she was actually very embarrassed to do this,
right? Because
she was collecting high-end handbags she'd bought from that store before. So then you go in with and Rolex just flat out will not authenticate. I mean, we've heard of will flat out not authenticate a watch if you go in and ask them. A lot of people think that it's one of those things like where it says on the back of the medicine bottle, go and see your GP to see if you should be taking this. But a lot of watch shops won't entertain you. What they say, the Rolex say, and Justin said this was, is they will send it off for a service, and the service will tell you whether it's fake or not. So I suppose that's another way of another pro of this.
Yeah. So typical, this is like, if you guys are first, if anyone is like not familiar, I'm sure this is like basic eBay, buy from reputable sellers as always. So, I mean, my seller had 100% review rating for thousands of sales. And I was super impressed when I opened up his previous sales, because I was just like, how can you not have one complainer, So, definitely look at that. If you've got a brand new account with 100% rating, but he's got two listings, and one of them is a high-end luxury watch and the other is some random stuff, that's not good. I went over the description. You should definitely read the description, read it again. Specifics here are words like replaced or changed or repaired. So there's some wording there that will get you kicked out of the not eligible for eBay authentication. So like modified is immediately will get you kicked out, things like that. So this puts it on the buyer and this puts it on the seller to list these pieces correctly, to say, listen, I had the crown replaced, but I have the old one. You're getting it in a bag. It's an OEM piece, this kind of thing. Like, so if you have any of the extra parts and pieces, that story that you should get with something like this, just like cars, just like, other stuff that have the story, as long as the story's good, then you're great. And then, real quick on the pros and cons of this, I kind of thought about it and went through. There's a lot of details out there where typical internet style, someone is like, I knew this one guy who had a horrible experience. and you're like, same with anything. Exactly. So like, look at the Better Business Bureau reviews on your local moving and storage place, or your rental car place. They're not amazing. Like somebody has always got this like crazy, I knew a guy that had this horrible thing happen. But so I think the pros here are, this is really closing the loop on any sort of Frankenstein watches and sellers of those watches, in an area of the market where a large amount of money is changing hands. So you've got, that $2,000 gap, or that $2,000 mark and beyond. Will things slip through? Yes, but it puts, like I said, it puts the onus back on the buyer and seller have confidence. So the buyer is getting a third party to confirm the seller's description. So it, like, number one, it has to meet all of that criteria. It has to actually match what they said. And the seller's getting some, confirmation and additional protection from unscrupulous buyers. I think, there's more unscrupulous buyers. I think there's more crazy buyers out there than there are sellers, because the buyers don't have a reputation to uphold. And, like we talked about, remember the authentication badge is just applied, to all items that eBay thinks will pass that description test. But,
And it's not we said this last week, didn't we? It's this watch is authentic, not this watch is in the condition that the seller says the watch is in. Is it cosmetic condition?
Yeah, it is that it matches the description too. So it could be in a different condition, but it's very specific there. Again, like the wording. This is why you got to go over the description really well. And the pro is that not everyone has a trusted watchmaker friend that they can bring it to. And then the cons that I came up with were, and this is just marketing to keep honest people honest. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like that is, that is what this is for. And there are that is a con, because it's, it's not actually maybe going to the lengths that some people might think that it would need. I was able to slip the no returns if removed off the watch, because of course that's just a spring bar tool away. So again, unscrupulous buyers, yes, I guess I could have, done something and blamed it on them. But the people inspecting the watches can't be experts in all things and catch all fakes. It's just not going to happen. I think, though, now that I've done some research, that Stolen Company, legitimate business, legitimate business with legitimate watchmakers. So it isn't some.
And this is just our opinion on that. It's, this is just our opinion. Knowing about watches it seems an almost insurmountable task. It's possible. It's highly likely that they've been trained on a number of different watches. But...
And we're not currently sponsored by eBay, and just. Your mileage may vary from both of us. This is just our opinion, but it seems, like I said, it's they're not they can't all be experts. They're maybe not doing a thorough enough inspection. It's not specifically discussed what steps, like down to the movement. So they said that some of them will be, they were kind of cagey on this and said, like, some will be opened and not all, and not the very specific wording that they use there. So they are not testing for water resistance, magnetism, accuracy. And these are basic tests that I think a local watchmaker could do. And maybe they should do that. Maybe they should add that to their to their list, because as I said, mine came in magnetized and was running weird. Maybe they don't want to go to that next step, because then they're kind of involved in a service, and that maybe is a conflict of interest, because then it was like, oh, well, yeah, we noticed it was running slow. Do you want us to service it for hundreds of dollars? And like, then that'd be a big interest. But I think that that's the first thing. If I hand my watch over to a watchmaker, we're putting it in the pressure tester and finding out if it's waterproof or water resistant. And then second, we're going to the time grapher. It's like 1, 2. And then it's like, oh, then we can open it up. So I guess, it's a interesting experience. I found it, they rebox the package. So they put it in like this security package, and they include some pamphlet material. My card for the watch matched perfectly all the information for the authentication. So they went through and, verified that, this was not the seller doing this. This was the service. Printed up this card with like an NFC chip in it that had all that information stored on it, and matched what was on my, yes, they could have just read it off whatever card was in the box. I agree. But also, I found it comforting. So I don't know how much more I would pay for an authentication service like this. Like,
yeah, you've got some good questions here, haven't you? That I think we should ask the audience.
Yeah. So, Sam, how much more would you pay for an authentication service or an authenticated watch like this?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like the other ones where they do a full breakdown of the watch, like Bob's Watches, Crown and Caliber, which now Hodinkee, of course, Chronex, a few of the others ones, they disassemble the watch, don't they, and service it and bring it up to a thing, and you are paying a premium for those, many hundreds more in some cases, I think. Yeah, that is an interesting because you're in between, aren't you? You're in between like Chrono 24 that does no authentication, but then they do have the escrow service.
Right.
And then you've got eBay, which is sort of like, we're authenticating the watch is real, but we're not doing anything cosmetically or mechanically.
Sort of like a visual inspection, basically, a basic visual inspection.
Yeah. I mean, I hope if there is a cost to this, I hope that the cost falls to the buyer, because the eBay fees at the moment are very expensive.
That's a good point.
I just sold a watch on eBay and it really hurt.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It really hurt.
Because if they pass it on to the seller, what's going to happen is the price is going up. With all of the fees and the shipping and everything, it's just that basically it's going up. I would say this to me is no more than a couple $100 of just to take a glance at it and to verify it. But interested to see what you guys think, and also whether that $2,000 price point should be raised or lower. I would love to see it kind of come down into like 1,800, because that to me is where my sort of level of this stuff starts. But I think that's a weird number and it's not good for marketing. So they just like 2,000. And also how many, like if you just lowered that number $200, how many more watches are you sending to Ohio?
Well, exactly. And plus, we've even heard about the fakes of the $5 Casio, haven't we?
Right.
The $10 Casio.
So
there's fakes up and down.
Yeah. So it would be interesting if they could maybe move that price point. I don't see that it will ever go sub 1,000. I don't see that happening, because there's just for that category of watches, we're not. I don't think it's not like the expensive movements or anything like that. This is just like a replace situation. Whereas stuff over 2,000, it feels like you would bring it to a watchmaker and spend hundreds of dollars to get it serviced, etc. It was interesting. I think after having it on the wrist here for a couple days, I think this watch needs a service. I think that its dimensional accuracy, I had it on the time grapher, and in some directions it's like +4, +5 of one dimension. It will as far as accuracy is concerned, being the accuracy snob that everyone knows that we are, it's right now it's running -5. It's okay. I'm okay with that. I'm running, completely fine for a watch from a chronograph from 2006. It's totally fine. But interested, maybe down the road I'll get it serviced and we'll share that. But it fits my watch collecting strategy, which is why get a regular one, when you can get a special one for kind of a similar price. So these things aren't always available everywhere. So I certainly have not, don't knock every service. I mean, you can have dealers that'll find these, you can have Chrono 24, and I think eBay is definitely, a very much an option here.
So guys, let us know what you think. If you've got any questions, let us over on the Facebook group about the authentication, either from me as a seller or Chris as a buyer. We really appreciate you watching and listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks guys, bye.